We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Lindsay Patterson, Mike Santagata. Mike, what's up?
Hydration. And
I know.
for
I was
yeah,
just joking with you. I drink so much water during the podcast.
that definitely put it on my mind. That was like a planned nuclear strike. You're just like, I drink a lot of water on the podcast. 3, 2, 1, go. I'm just like,
Drink some
oh, I should
water.
drink some water.
Water's good. The Cincinnati Bengals. We have officially hit the period of summer break. You get the OTAs over, you get the voluntary workouts over, you get the mandatory minicamp over. Now we just wait until training camp. But in the meantime, thought it'd be really cool on Tuesdays if we did kind of a player profile. And by that, I mean, let's focus on players, maybe a guy we don't talk about enough when it comes to what they look like as a player, what their outlook is for the upcoming season, and asked the people on Twitter and decided to go with Zach Carter. Because I feel like we don't really talk about Zach Carter. And I think when Zach was drafted a couple years ago, last draft, that a
Last
lot of
year,
people were wondering, hmm, is this going to work? What does this look like? And I know Paul Dehner actually talked to Zach Carter, and I want to say he put on 20 pounds of muscle this offseason. We'll see what that means when it comes to his body on the defensive side of the ball. But I wanted you to go back and watch some Zach Carter. Give us a little bit of a player profile going into the 2023 season.
yeah, 20 pounds of muscle. He was so undersized for a Bengals defensive tackle. 270 pounds. I remember I did. If you aren't following me on all Bengals, I looked at the thresholds for edge rushers, for defensive tackles, and what they normally like. What like what's a good number for a guy to have size, measurable, testing, etc. And Zach Carter did set the bar for the lightest defensive tackle taken, and he was kind of light for a defensive end for them. He's 273 pounds, I believe, at the combine, and they usually go 300 plus. Even Gino was near 300, like maybe just under if you're thinking of smaller defensive tackles that the Bengals have drafted. And Carter's tall, so he's slimmed out for that. I think it's important to go back at this point. When you get like 4 or 5 years into a guy's career, you can kind of skip past the college stuff. That's why I kind of throw out the RAS number on Irv Smith. It's like says he's a bad athlete. Well, he's a good athlete on the field, so I don't really care. But I like to go back because I watched this guy in depth and check out what I said about Zach Carter. And a lot of it remains true. I don't think he's shown what I saw in terms of pass rush at Florida. Just statistically, he had what did he have 5 sacks his junior year, and he also had 8 sacks his senior year. So you think, yeah, and he showed a little bit as a pass rusher. He had some moves he liked to use. He liked that long arm bull rush where you have one arm stabbing into the guy using his length. He's got over 33-inch arms. That's probably longer than the guard he's facing. And when you make your one arm, that's longer than two. So makes sense why he likes that. He also had a secondary move off of it. So I thought the upper body stuff seemed fine. I also liked him in the run game when he was using his upper body to steer blockers and just move guys the way they don't want to go. And he had a little bit of agility, some wiggle to him. But what you didn't see was a great anchor in the run game, and you didn't see a good first step, which to me that's the most important thing a defensive lineman can have as a pass rusher is that first step, get off the ball. It's why Larry Ogunjobi is going to get contracts until he doesn't care anymore. And he's a pretty good player. Like I liked him. I actually would have kept him over BJ Hill because of this, but maybe egg on my face a little bit. I think they're still playing a little similar level. Who knows? But yeah, doesn't have the nice anchor, and he's inconsistent with his hand placement. Not great when your main move is to hit a guy perfectly in the middle of his chest to drive him backwards. So when you aim that and you miss high, it's easy. It just falls off. You aim low, it just gets knocked down. And all of that kind of showed up on film in the NFL level, and the NFL's faster. So his first step in college wasn't that great. At the NFL, it's not good, and it's okay. It could maybe get better, or he could get bigger, which is what he did. And then maybe you're playing the BJ Hill type rather than trying to be a guy that can fly off the ball and get a bunch of sacks. So that's kind of what I see on film is the same. Upper body is strong. Lower body needs a little bit of work. He put on some weight, probably good weight, I would think. He was probably never going to step into the league and be a 4 or 5 sack guy at defensive tackle, which would be pretty good. Um, Not elite, but pretty good. And he was a late third round pick for a reason in a draft that I think wasn't very good at defensive tackle. Now, I don't think he's doomed. I think he put on that weight. He could become a better run stopper. I like his upper body when stopping the run. Like I've mentioned a lot with him, is its lower body I'm not in love with, but the upper body I do like a lot, other than the hand placement. So on film, that's what I see. There are a lot of statistics probably to dive into as well, but I wanted to get your feelings about him yourself too. I mean, I don't I don't know if I would say too much definitively on his career. I think you could fairly say he wasn't an impressive rookie. Half a sack, not much production. I believe Pro Football Reference has him for 2 pressures on the season, which is less than every 100 snaps. He played 350 plus snaps this year. So, what are your thoughts, quick, on Zach Carter before I go into more?
Yeah, with Zach Carter, it's just so hard to tell because I do feel like it was a disappointing rookie year for him. Could that change in year two? And I do think, the dedication of putting on 20 pounds for muscle is huge when it comes to the competition and realizing, hey, I have to get bigger. And being able to do that, we'll see if that makes a difference, what his impact will be. Before you get into more of the player profile, let me ask you, what do you think would be a successful season this year for Zach Carter?
Ooh, great question. My first thought is definitely secure your spot on the team next year. That would be the first successful season. Is like, oh, we know who are at least at worst you're the rotational 3 tech, or I guess a really successful season is to know next year he's your starter. He's a starter at 3 tech, and the Bengals like to play 2 3 techs or a 5 tech, 3 to 5, somewhere in there. And that's one thing Zach Carter does well, is he is pretty versatile to be able to kick further out than like a BJ Hill normally can and keep some of his play level the same. So he can kick out the 5 tech even a little bit further if you need him to. Although I think they've always wanted him at 3 technique, which is right outside the guard, and that's probably also why he's putting on weight so he can play that position, and alignment. Yeah, I think a successful season. I'm not even going to think statistically, but well, I guess if I'm not thinking statistically, it's what I said. It's that he's a role player or a starter for sure next year, which would be better than he played this year, which I think you should expect too. I think you should expect him to be better this year than he was last year. That's the point of drafting these guys in the late third, is they're not going to be, you know, great right away, but they're hopefully able to develop into something. I think statistically, if you want to throw something out there, he forces at least 500 snaps, so he can spell BJ Hill, DJ Reader a little bit. And DJ's not going to play 3 tech, but on passing downs, maybe you could pull DJ off the field and let him rest and have Zach Carter, BJ Hill, or some type of fun, Sam Hubbard, Miles Murphy, whatever on the inside. And he's able to take some of those snaps as well. So I think that's statistically, the 500 snaps, and I don't know, 3 sacks, I think would be a pretty successful campaign. I doesn't seem high, but when you're talking about defensive tackles, they don't average 10 sacks. Like good defensive tackles, not elite. Like Gino could get 10 plus, whatever. But a good 3 technique is probably averaging 6, 7 sacks. You think of what Larry Ogunjobi did; it felt like a ton of sacks, and it was. But I'm going to get that right, so I'm going to look it up real quick. But that's why that's what I would think is a successful season for Zach Carter, just because he didn't show a ton this year, but I think there's room for him to grow and show some improvement. Ogunjobi got 7 sacks his last season with the Bengals, 1.5 sacks last year. I mean, if you can get Larry Ogunjobi was getting 5.5. You got that twice in Cleveland. Defensive tackle sacks also, by the way, not consistent. You got guys, and I think Ogunjobi's career is a good one to look at because it's 1.5, 5.5, 5.5, 1.5, 7, 1.5. It's like, yeah, he's getting sacks sometimes, but defensive tackles are just so reliant on, luck. And this is why sometimes you look at things like pressure and quarterback hits, which are a little bit more sustainable. Although Ogunjobi also averages pretty low quarterback hit numbers in the years that he had 1 and 2.5 sacks. He did get 11 quarterback hits last year, and he only had 16 in 2021. So 1.5 sacks, but not that many less quarterback hits, 1.5 compared to 7. When it comes to pressures, he's been pretty consistent there too. I mean, pushing 20. So I'm not looking at Larry Ogunjobi as a comparison, but I think that's a good template for what you should expect out of defensive tackles, just because as pass rushers, it's more variable than as edge rushers.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point about, making the roster. And you're talking about, I mean, it would be a total shock if he didn't make this year's roster, right?
Right. Yeah, he's going to make the roster. You don't cut a guy in year 2, but year 3, I think that's when the question comes, because I wouldn't cut him, but people are talking about Cam Sample that way. And I think Cam Sample played better than Zach Carter did. So if he's not a lock to make the team, then you have to be pretty good in year 3. And that might depend on, do they draft a defensive tackle with their first round pick next year, which is kind of, I think, some of the reasoning behind maybe Cam Sample gets knocked off. If it's me, I'm keeping Cam Sample over, I don't know, Terrell Basham or Jay Tufele or all these other guys that are possibly, even Josh Tupou. And some of those guys are interior guys, but still, I'm keeping him on the team because he can moonlight a little inside. He's kind of the opposite Zach Carter. Zach Carter is 3 technique and he moonlights outside, and Cam Sample is outside and he moonlights inside sometimes.
You talk about getting to the quarterback, and when you said 3 sacks, I'd be impressed if he was able to get 3 sacks. I would say.
Well, I think some people have it in their mind. It's like 6, 7 sacks. Oh. It's like that's good. That's really good.
Well, the thing that they struggled with, and this defense is legit. We've talked about it over the last 2 years. I even brought it up in a podcast this offseason. Do we feel like the defense outperformed the offense at times, just with the way they played the majority of the season? You could say in the postseason is a good example, but they need to get to the quarterback. I want to see them put the pressure on getting to the quarterback, and that's going to help your young secondary, to be completely honest. If you can get that pressure on the opposing quarterback, and maybe Zach Carter shines, and I don't know. We'll see if the muscle makes a huge difference for him. But you do feel like when the Bengals drafted him, the previous draft, that he was undersized.
Yeah, especially for what they normally like. But I want to get to one more point, and it's just that he started off much slower than he finished. I think he flashed a bit in both Baltimore games, the season ender and the playoff wild card round. Against the Bills, not so much, and not so much against the Chiefs, but it matched up with the film. I know Joe Goodberry, friend of the show, everybody is, posted his PFF numbers, and the first ones are all red. They're all like under 40. But then there's still those that are like 40, 35 in the second half. And I'm not huge in just using the PFF numbers, but I do think as a generality, this could indicate something for him. There were 65s and 70s, in there. It's just like he started to flash. And I think those are the games that he flashed because he doesn't play enough snaps for, it to really, one big play from him is probably going to boost those numbers. And I don't want to get into PFF grading and how that works, but I think it matched up with the film. I think when you saw the film, it looked like the game might have slowed down a little bit for him. I'm not going to say a ton, but I think it slowed down a little bit where he's able to read the blocks. He's able to read his keys. He can read run pass. He can read what run's coming. Is it zone away from me, zone to me, power, trap, all these other things coming my way? How do I defeat those blocks? Early on, it felt like he had no feel for it, but later it seemed like he had a feel for it, and that matches up with the numbers Joe Goodberry posted. So if you're trying to build up the case for him, it's that he's putting on weight, which, I mean, it's off season. Everybody is in the best shape of their lives. They're putting on weight, losing weight, whatever they need to do. So, but you believe it. So he puts on weight. He got better in the second half of the year. The game's slowing down a little bit for him. You just think all that muscle in the intelligence is building up, the recognition, the feel, everything like that. And now you can start building the case, especially as maybe a run stopper, that he could be better next year and maybe solidify himself onto the team. As a pass rusher, to me, I I would like to see the first step improve, and I don't know how much that can improve other than just timing the snap count, getting keys on the snap count a little bit. I know not everybody, I think at the NFL level, a lot of those guys don't watch the ball anymore. They watch the man across from them. And that's also why some offensive linemen will, on a false one, just kind of like move their foot a little bit. Not like pick it up, move it, anything egregious, but just like turn the ankle, just see if you can get a guy to jump off sides in that situation, or just like kind of sit back in their stance, which is allowed as long as you don't pick up the foot or move it in any way that really indicates that you're coming, or maybe just like open, close the hand, just give some type of flash to the defensive lineman. But they watch those guys. They watch like the knee and to get for their get off. And maybe that's how you can build the better first step, is he can better anticipate it. That's something that, Mike Hilton does extremely well, anticipate snap counts. So does Trey Hendrickson. And if he can anticipate snap counts, if he can jump it that way, I'm not asking him to just straight jump snaps and just guess all the time, because that's how you get penalties and that won't help you. But if he can build up a better snap anticipation and get off that way rather than through explosion, because I don't know how much better can your explosion get, especially if you're going to put on weight, because that's putting on weight usually means you're a little bit slower, which is fine because as defensive tackle, the get off is for pass rushing. But if he's going to be a heck of a run defender, he's going to be if he could be the BJ Hill down the road replacement, that would come with putting on weight. So that makes sense. So all those things could add to a better season for him next year. I don't think I'm pessimistic, but I also don't think I'm really optimistic about his outlook for next year. I'm very middle of the road. I think he has to play a role because this team is pretty shallow at defensive tackle, but I don't think you should expect, I think you should expect better than last year, but how much better would be the question. And is he going to provide some plus value in either the run or the pass defense that you can point to as to that's why we're going to keep him next year. So that's what I would look at, is he's going to give you something. This would be a successful year. He gives you something that you point at and you go like, that's why he's staying on the team next year. He's cheap and he gives us plus value in whatever.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with Zach Carter on the Bengals roster in this season. Going to be there next year, but we'll see the following season for Zach Carter. Player profiles will continue every Tuesday. We'll do another one. You can do the Jamar Chases, the T. Higgins, the Joe Burrow, but it's kind of fun to do guys on the back end or in the middle of the roster too. So that's what we're going to really focus on early, but we'll get to more on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati next. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati, off-season edition. It's weird to call it off-season because it's just in the middle. We should call it summer break. Summer break for the Cincinnati Bengals for the next 6 weeks before they hit training camp on July 26th. Saw this on social media. Zim Hude, friend of the show, said, what former Bengals would you take a flyer on right now? This is just for fun. I don't know how serious I feel about this, but we'll go ahead and give the options that he listed. Mo Sanu, former wide receiver. Tyler Eifert, former tight end, and really active on social media when it comes to the Bengals, and I love to see that. Carlos Dunlap, everybody knows what happened there. Or Eli Apple, which I feel like is a pretty easy answer too.
Okay, quick question for you. Who do you think has played a game more recently, Mohamed Sanu or Tyler Eifert?
Mohamed Sanu's son.
Well, Sanu has. This is why in the poll, Tyler Eifert is like the number one option. He's the guy who hasn't played since 2020. Sanu played in 2021. Yeah, it's been a long time. So that's the main concern, because look, Eifert makes the most sense when you look at the roster and you kind of go like,
oh, really?
You have those orange. Well, I just think tight end is the weakest position out of the group. So, I mean, they're pretty stacked at defensive line. They've got a lot of corners. You may not love them all, but they have a lot of them. Yeah. And wide receiver, they've got plenty of wide receivers too. You talk about cutting Yoshivas, and I wouldn't, but the argument comes from all the wide receivers. Like, who else are you going to, who are you going to cut if it's not him? And then you look around and like, I don't know.
Where did Taylor, the Yoshi go? Where did the Yoshi go?
Yeah, I've seen people say that maybe you put him on the practice squad. I think he's too talented to
he'll be
make
gone.
that. Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought. I was like, dude, cut Trent Taylor, put him on the practice squad. They got him from he was a practice squad player before he got here. So that's what I would do. But I've seen some people, not this podcast, but some people
No,
express the
no, no,
idea, which
no.
I immediately reject. I was like, no, wait, what's the point in drafting a guy in the 6th round if you're going to cut him, then try to play that game? Like, don't play the game. 7th round pick, sure, you can try to get him on the practice squad, but don't do that with a 6th round guy that to me was probably a mid-round pick that fell. Anyway, Mohamed Sanu, he caught 15 passes in 2021. Obviously not that much, but I just wanted to point out that everybody that's putting Eifert, who I think was number 1 on his poll last time I checked,
I'm going to check right
he hasn't
now.
played in 3 years. I'm not going to say Eifert can't play. I think it's reasonable to doubt that he could step onto this team and take meaningful snaps. I mean, even in Jacksonville, he was fine, but he wasn't prime Eifert. I think people really put on those orange tinted glasses when they think about Tyler Eifert. They're like, man, remember that one year he had all those touchdowns? And it's just, yeah, that was, man, I don't want to feel old, but that was 8 years ago. So, man, my answer for this though, or are you going to say something?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, my answer is Carlos Dunlap. Just because I think they signed the Eli Apple guy already in Sidney Jones, and I like Sidney Jones a little bit. So I'm fine trying to see what Jones will bring to the team. Not to say Apple wouldn't be better. I think Apple's a fine starting corner, and you don't find that. He's also, it doesn't seem like the NFL's that interested, so he's going to be around if you have some injury mishaps and whatnot. So maybe you could sign him then. I assume that he's still friendly with the Bengals coaching staff and would like to come play. It seemed like he and his family seem to love Lou Anarumo and Zach Taylor. So I don't think it's a split there. I just think the front office went with a guy in Sidney Jones who was on a similar career path to Eli Apple before he was picked up by the Bengals. When I look at Carlos Dunlap, he had 4 sacks last year and 8 batted passes. And he was a contributor on a team that won a championship ring. I understand all the issues with how he left and the rift in the coaching staff and, all of that. That was a Carlos Dunlap who thought he was still a full-time starter and was getting upset about, playing underneath guys, younger guys, whatever else, and maybe didn't fully buy into the idea. To me, when you just look at on field, this is a guy that's probably, I won't say probably, but he has a case as the most talented still remaining of these 4 guys. I don't think I'm considering Sanu and Eifert for this experiment as much. It's really between Apple and Dunlap because they played last year. Man, I mean, Dunlap did well in the AFC Championship game. Mm-hmm. I remember looking, I was like, man, Carlos Dunlap can still move a little bit. He could still rush the passer a little bit. And I know this team has a ton of edge rushers, but I would probably prefer him to Terrell Basham. I just think he can give you value, whether it's rushing the passer or swatting those balls. And we know the issue with batted passes.
Yeah.
The Bengals saw it all last year, especially in the first half of last year. So if he can come in, bat some passes, rush the quarterback a little bit, provide some value that way, I think he would be the best out of these guys. The thing that complicates it is the Myles Murphy part of everything.
I would say
going to get Dunlap is just like a win now and don't even think about like where we need to play these guys so many snaps for the future. I just think we're going to get him and he's going to play some, he's going to contribute.
Some franchises are different. Some forget about the past.
Yeah, they won't.
And they connect. The Cincinnati Bengals, and I'm not against this decision. I don't think they'll go back to that. And look, there's no rumors or anything that Carlos Dunlap and the Cincinnati Bengals are talking. It was just a fun poll on Twitter, and it's the middle of summer break for the Bengals. So I'm just going to bring it up. It's kind of fun. Carlos Dunlap, I don't think it would happen just because of the history, and I know it feels so recent. Nothing against him winning a ring or anything like that. It just feels so recent of the breakup between Carlos Dunlap and the Cincinnati Bengals. Most of them, I feel like they have plenty of wide receivers. Honestly, you go back to last year, even when Chase was down, would love the depth in the wide receiver room, but they were able to have guys like Trent Irwin and Trent Taylor step up, and I do think Trent Taylor is the odd man out. The Yoshi stuff is absolutely weird to me. If anybody's thinking, right? Oh, he can be safe on a practice squad, he won't be safe.
No.
he won't be. And I think the Bengals
he won't make the practice squad. He'll get picked up before he like on waivers. Somebody will pick him up. Like, oh, they cut Yoshi. Like, why?
Well, he had a late third, fourth round grade. And you know, who knows what that means at the end of the day, but the Cincinnati Bengals had him in for 2 days, and I think they really thought a lot of him. So I think they're going to see what happens, and I think he's been really impressive in their offseason program.
Troy Walters said he's more refined than we thought coming in, which it's offseason. Everybody's going to be, best, blah blah blah. But you want to see the good smoke. You don't want to see, oh wow, this guy's a real project, But like putting coach speak, as in like, yeah, we have to make sure this guy gets reps in the preseason because he's from group of 5 competition or something like that. Instead, you're seeing he's more refined, and maybe you think that's good news. Maybe you're a little bit pessimistic on all this stuff like me, and you think like that's fine news. You hope it's good news, but I'm more so in the camp of like, it's probably just fine unless I see Yoshi's running with the ones. Which is
that would kind of scare me. No Yoshi, but like where their ones and their 2s and 3s are right
but
now.
Maybe you see like when T. Higgins comes off, Yoshi Voss comes on. It's not Trent Irwin. That would put me into the like, oh, that's really.
I don't think I want to relive that moment. No offense to Trent Irwin. I mean, I think he'll do just fine on the roster. But I don't want to be back in that situation where that's what they're focusing on, and that's their wide receiver room when Jamar Chase was out, or T. Higgins was out, or Tyler Boyd. But yeah, the Yoshi stuff is wild, and not to make this about Yoshi, but the wide receiver room just in general with the Mohamed Sanu question. I heard his interview. He had mentioned in rookie camp, he's like, you got all the jitters out in rookie camp. And he's like, now I feel really comfortable with the team being able to be with these guys in the vet. So I think that's extremely helpful. Tyler Eifert, I think fans love the idea because they see how it's a social media thing right now. Not the old Tyler Eifert. I mean, if he could, it's unfortunate that Tyler Eifert and AJ Green couldn't stay healthy.
It's really unfortunate that Tyler Eifert, basically his career fell off a little bit because of a Pro Bowl injury. That was probably up there as one of the most unfortunate. Like, he just arrived as possibly a superstar type tight end, Pro Bowler tight end, and then a back injury in the Pro Bowl that he just seems like he never fully recovered from. That's what really stinks, is any type of Pro Bowl injury. Like, you could have skipped that, and then who knows, maybe he gets listed as like a 5-time Pro Bowler in his career. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And Tyler Eifert is fun. I love everything, how he's embracing the city and the Cincinnati Bengals. We're seeing a lot of former players do that. I think he should be a ruler of the jungle one time this year. I think that would be a lot of fun, and really love to see that. That's awesome. But I think I've said this before. It's an unpopular opinion. I just don't think the Bengals utilize the tight end position as much as other teams. So I think they're going to roll in with who they have in their tight end room and be okay with that. And that's just the way it's going to go. Maybe it's not a new shiny toy besides Irv Smith Jr. And, if he can stay healthy, but I think they're fine with where they're at. Eli Apple is mine. It's the pick.
I understand. That was my number 2. And part of me is almost only picking Dunlap because I know that fans are lower on him than me, just because he's still a good player. And that's why I think sometimes is missing, which I can already hear the keyboard clattering for he took plays off, he loafs, he doesn't try, all this other stuff. It's like, look, man, he's had 100 sacks in his career, and you don't do that by accident. That you have a long career and you play through injury, you do all of this. It's not because he's not a guy that's never tried in his life. So I think he's still a plus addition to the team. But yeah, Eli Apple's still a fine starting corner. And he played for the team last year, and there's no rift. So I fully get why you would go that way. It seems we are in agreement that it's not Sanu or Eifert just because of...
I lean towards Eli for a couple reasons.
When has a guy ever come back from 3 years of retirement and been good, though, besides Michael Jordan? Different sport.
Wait, who retired 3 times? What am I missing?
No. Retired for 3 years. Not retired 3 times. I think Brett Favre's probably threatened to retire 100 times.
Yeah, it doesn't work out, especially in the NFL. I mean, I know these guys are beasts and they're just different kind of athletes, but it's just not the same.
NFL shape's different than being in shape, too.
Especially in the wide receiver room.
So tight ends get crushed.
Yes, but with Eli, I think hold a soft spot because he was there and stepped up during the 10-game win streak after the Cleveland game and was serviceable. And he did just fine. I think about that Thursday night game with Tyreek Hill. I love it. He's not afraid to say things. And yes, I think a lot of people thought after the Bills game, probably didn't need to say all of that stuff. But he had fun and he embraces that role. And I think, there's the Cincinnati Bengals, he felt comfortable here and felt like this was his third chance in the NFL, really. So I still hold out a little bit of hope. No, not because there's injuries. I don't want any injuries with your secondary. And Chido looks unbelievable right now in some of the videos, but I kind of want Eli to be a part of it. If Eli Apple was able to get a Super Bowl ring in Cincinnati, he'd probably just be like, that was enough. I'm done. I'm good. Eli Apple on Twitter the rest of the offseason, he's good, has a Super Bowl ring, and he rides off into the sunset. But me personally, I just think you can pile up on your cornerbacks, and having him out there during a really important time for the secondary was absolutely huge last year. So that's where I'm at. The other guys, I'm just not there. And no offense, because I loved everything Mohamed Sanu did while he was in Cincinnati. Because say the same thing about Tyler Eifert. It's really unfortunate he was injured most of his career here. And then Carlos Dunlap. It's unfortunate the way it ended, because I know there's a lot of really good times with Carlos Dunlap, and there's a lot that he would do off the field that I thought was really awesome. But yeah, it's just unfortunate. I just feel like that's something that's not going to be. He's not coming back.
No, not really realistic. So yeah, I agree. End of the day, I went Dunlap, but I'm probably, if I was in the front office, I'm going Apple because I don't have to convince my boss and be like, hey, that guy that I really had an issue with a few years ago, I'm bringing him back. He's a changed guy.
Are you surprised he's not with another team?
Okay. Phrase that question for Yannick Ngakoue, Melvin Ingram, Justin Houston, all these other guys. It seems like nobody cares about these old edge rushers that still got a little bit juice to them. So I actually wanted the Bengals to go after one of these guys early on in the offseason. But when you draft Myles Murphy, that makes the role questionable. And sometimes those former high-end starters are going to complain when they don't get enough playing time. I think of Melvin Ingram did that in Pittsburgh, and then he got traded to the Chiefs. I don't know if Dunlap would do that because it felt like he had his role reduced in Kansas City. I think he only played 400 snaps or so. So maybe he doesn't do it, but you never know. 400 snaps, that's still over 20 snaps a game, and I don't think he would have that role in Cincinnati. So maybe he would complain. Ngakoue, I think Ngakoue wants to be a starter. I don't think he's done giving that up yet. So a lot of those guys, you kind of look at them and go, man, I'm a little surprised that guy's still out there. And sometimes they sign with a team later on. I think this might have been true for Dunlap last year before he signed with Kansas City. Yep. And sometimes they just retire. Michael Bennett was like a fine player his last year, and then he just never signed and retired. And that just happens. Some of these guys don't want to play 10 snaps a game. They don't want to be just, pass rush specialist role player. They want to play real snaps and 20, 25 snaps a game. And that's not going to be the case for most of these guys, at least with the Bengals.
Man, I would definitely take a paycheck to only do 10 snaps a game. That would be
awesome. These guys have made so much money. They're not going to get a good contract for them.
No.
Look at what Dunlap and Ingram and Ngakoue made on their last big deals. And then you think about where do you get in Cincinnati? 1 year, $1 million, something like that. And it's probably not fully guaranteed. It's like you could probably get cut.
No, and cut before the season starts. So yeah, it probably wouldn't happen. But no, I kind of like that. It's kind of fun to do this or that player, if they were to return to Cincinnati. But yeah, I'm still holding out hope Eli comes back. I don't think Eli's ready to retire.
I would say no too, because he hasn't slowed down. So yeah. Why would he retire? The only thing with him is I don't know who else is interested besides the Bengals. And that's kind of proven true this offseason so far. I thought he was a fine starting corner. I think he's better than the guys like the Rams have out there, but the Rams aren't going to sign him because there's a little bit of that Twitter stuff. And there's also the label that came with him. And look,
it did.
They probably, they've watched the Super Bowl plenty, so it wasn't his best game, but I think he's probably better than what they have out there. There's probably some other teams that could use him too. Just like a guy that can go out there and start at corner. That sounds like a guy that most teams could use. But there's just other baggage that comes with it. The Bengals don't care. And I probably wouldn't care either. Say whatever you want on Twitter. Who cares? Especially if you're doing it after the game.
I mean,
Whatever.
it's funny. It's funny. I love everything about it because he's not afraid to do it. And then after the games, when he was holding the coin around Paycor Stadium after the coin flip game, just smiling with, I love it. Absolutely love it. And he played it perfectly. And I just felt like he felt welcomed in Cincinnati. And I'm still all for Eli coming back. I don't want any injuries. Just Eli, come back. Just join the defense. Add another cornerback. But we'll see what happens with that scenario. Just kind of a fun conversation. Next, let's do a little look back because mandatory minicamp is over. Offensive line. We could always talk about that on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati talking about a little look back. Mandatory minicamp is in the books for the Cincinnati Bengals. Pretty short and sweet, nothing too crazy. Jonah Williams returned. Chido Awuzie is back out there doing incredible work and just proves once again that athletes are incredible human beings. Looks really encouraging for Chido in September. And I know nobody's putting out a date and official clearance for Chido, Jonah, any of the guys working on the side, even Lyle Collins. But would you be surprised right now if Chido is ready for the first weekend of September? Or second week?
Not that surprised. Maybe a little. Just it feels like the entire time people have been saying like, don't be surprised if he misses time. So I've kind of built myself towards that. Mm-hmm. And look, it's you aim low, and then when you finish high, you feel really good. But if you aimed high and you thought he'd be ready week 1, and then he's not ready, you're gonna be disappointed. I'm not gonna be disappointed if he's not ready week 1, because to me, it's more important he's ready in the playoffs, in the push for maybe the number 1 seed, than it is he's ready for week 1 against the Browns. Look, man, I don't care. Throw somebody out there against the Browns. Let DJ Turner try. Hopefully none of these guys get killed. But, I mean, the Browns passing offense didn't really scare people, especially with redacted at quarterback. So maybe it does this year. Who knows? Maybe the cobwebs came off. I am a skeptic. Mostly because I don't like the guy they have at quarterback, even if he used to be good. So yeah. I personally, I don't care that much if Chido's healthy week 1. I think it'd be awesome for him. I think it'd be awesome in terms of he made such a fast recovery. But with ACL injuries, you're usually you're fine to play at 9 months?
There is like an 8 to 9 month right now because ACLs are so different than they were 15, 20 years ago.
I tore mine 11 years ago, and it is different. Well, especially different when you have money. And I don't think anybody does the old what I had done, which was taking a third off of my patellar tendon and making that my ACL. I don't think they do that anymore. I think they have like lab grown ACLs that they put in there. Pretty cool stuff. Probably not as big of a scar either. But anyway, yeah, I didn't feel good the whole next year that I played basketball because the ACL it happened in the basketball season, so I couldn't play football next year. I played basketball and it just didn't feel right. Nothing felt good. And I hated the knee sleeve. I had to wear like this knee sleeve, not a brace, because that'd be weird to play basketball with. But I had to wear this knee sleeve. It always slid down. I hated that thing. But anyway, enough about my ACL that nobody cares about. That's just my experience with it when I look at Chido, and I think I'm not going to expect him to play at the same level, especially right away. At 9 months, I don't expect the same level of play. When you looked at Geno Atkins, completely different body type, different position, doing different things, but he really wasn't the same next year. But then he got really good right after that. Sometimes it takes those guys a little bit, and I wouldn't be surprised if Chido starts off a little rocky. I wouldn't kill him on Twitter. I wouldn't yell about starting DJ Turner. I wouldn't yell about any of that stuff. I would be patient. And I think by the end of the year, and this is true about Trey White last year, he got better as the season went on. By the end of the year in the playoffs, he could be back to normal. But I think at that 9 months, 10 months, 11 months, before you get to a full year since your surgery, I'm not going to expect too much. So that's where I am on Chido. I don't know if you have anything different. He does look awesome in like every video though. doing stuff I definitely could never do. But like, man, I just watched that and I go, he's high end for this, but NFL athletes just crazy different, like the way they can move.
There's about three things I want to hit on with Chido, and then we'll get to other items when it comes to the Cincinnati Bengals players on the offense and defensive side. Number one, the same surgeon, Neil Alatrash. I'm probably butchering his last name, but the one who did Joe Burrow's ACL surgery, Andrew Whitworth, from a couple years ago, he is the one that performed the Chido surgery. Number two, I like the Bengals training staff. I've been really extremely impressed with them for the last couple of years when it comes to getting these guys ready, dealing with ACL injuries and just other injuries when it comes to rehab. So I do trust that. I don't know if I'm a number 3 or 4 right now, but number 3, Chido coming back for the Cleveland game to open the season. I agree with you. The important games down the stretch, your other AFC North games, your tough battles versus the Bills, you could say the Jags and even Kansas City Chiefs. And then you go into January, Chiefs late in the season. Having Chido there is going to be absolutely unbelievable. And it's a huge deal not having Chido there. One of your best, we've said it before, maybe he was the best player. I know it's so easy to put DJ Reader in that category last season too, but Chido was amazing. Cornerback number 1. I think it would be so cool for him to be able to. That was the game, October 31st, Halloween night. It was against the Cleveland Browns. Chido gets injured. And seeing Chido last season for pretty much the whole entire stretch, in November, December, January, he was on the sidelines. He was with his crutches, post-surgery, before surgery, always there with the team. I mean, they had to get him a chair at one point just to kind of like, hey, stay back from everybody. Don't run into anyone. And I just thought that was really telling of Chido as a leader and what this defense means to him. And I just think it would be a really cool story to get him back. But obviously, one thing I think the Cincinnati Bengals have learned over the last couple of seasons, don't rush a guy back. And we're going to see a very similar thing with La'el Collins. And I think we're in an agreement that La'el is going to be on the roster. I just don't know what his impact is going to be. We've mentioned guard before. At what point, I mean, because Alex Kappa, I feel like, is their best offensive lineman. Outside of Orlando Brown, I mean, we'll see what Orlando Brown looks like at left tackle. Obviously, an upgrade over Jonah. But if you were to put La'el Collins, say Cordell Wilson was pretty much like he was his rookie year, would you give La'el Collins a shot at guard?
Honestly, I mean, if Wilson's playing the same he did last year, probably not. But if he takes a step back, then yes. I don't want to derail a guy, which when too? Do you mean like week 6? Or do you mean before a playoff game? Or
no, I wouldn't do that to the playoff situation, just because I feel like it's just been absolutely a musical chairs when it comes to Joe Burrow's playoff offensive line over the last couple of years. I would say you're getting into week 8 of the season. And I hope Cordell Wilson works out, because if you can get a young guy on a rookie contract working out in the guard position, because everybody knows what guards are getting paid in the NFL, and the Bengals do not like to pay guards besides bringing in Alex Kappa. But that's besides the point. Overall, I want him to work out. And I do think he'll get better. I think when you have a guy like Orlando Brown over there as a leader, a mentor, hanging out with these guys off the field, when they're at their programs, and just getting that chemistry is going to be so huge for Cordell Wilson. I'm just saying, and I don't want this to happen because I want Cordell to work out, but also I hope La'el isn't rushed back and he feels like the midway point of the season, maybe it's November, and they're like, you know what? Cordell's just not getting it done right now. Let's put La'el out there right next to Orlando Brown. What would you think that would look like?
I mean, the sheer mass would be exciting. 700 pounds between two guys. But man, I think Wilson is fine. I thought he was fine for most of last year. I don't think it ended great. I don't think it started great, but there's that period in between, and especially towards the end of the regular season, not the last game, but everything else. I thought he was playing at a pretty decent level. So if he's giving you that, then I'm probably not bothering replacing him, because it also comes with the caveat of, like we discussed on our podcast, one of our first ones with Duke Manyweather, those guys take time to click together, right? So he said 6 to 8 weeks. If you've just now developed the chemistry between Orlando Brown and Cordell Wilson, and then you switch them out and put Collins in there, I guess it should be fine by the playoffs. But I think Collins, maybe with the way he moves at this stage in his career, guard could be better suited for him. I think it's kind of tough if he doesn't. If it's a if a guy's playing at a starting level, it's kind of tough to fit him in there because last year he didn't play at an all-star level. He kind of played at that level. So you're going to take Volson out and come with the question mark. He's played there years ago and he was awesome at left guard. Comes with the question mark though. Can he do it again? Can he make that switch after all these injuries that have limited him at right tackle and plug him in? The reason it could work at right tackle is because he just worked with Alex Kappa, but at left guard, he has no experience with Ted Karras. He has no experience with Orlando Brown. And that's true if Kappa gets injured, try to fit him into right guard. He has no experience with whoever's at right tackle. I think it'll be Jonah Williams, but maybe it's Jackson Carman. He has no experience with Ted Karras. So that's where I think some of the issue lies, is that he doesn't have the chemistry and experience with these guys. I think when it's an injury, it makes more sense to me. Here's the scenario I think he could take a left guard starting job and it's unfortunate, but we'll say not a major injury, but Volson gets nicked up and he misses a game. And Volson's been playing at that fine starting level. Hasn't become great, hasn't become a star. He's fine. He's starting. And then Collins gets in there and it looks like prime Lyle Collins. That's where I think it becomes difficult to make the switch back out. And that's where you could see him start. But if these guys are healthy, it's hard to just kind of shove him in there. I've thought about that with if Jonah or Carman is starting, how bad do they have to be to not lose the job before this, but for Collins to just get, once he's ready, gets in there and plays right tackle? Because in my mind, it's probably below a starting level. That's where you probably have to be. You have to be, whoever he replaces, probably the clear worst offensive lineman on the active, not the active roster, but like out of the starting five. And that's just, I don't know. It's kind of tough to fit in if he's not ready week 1 or week 2. If he's not ready till week 5, week 6, it's real tough to just throw him in there because a little bit of it is the sunk cost of these guys are finally gelling and we're just going to toss you into that. And a little bit of it is also kind of Volson's on the team long term. Collins isn't. That's not true for Jonah Williams. But if Jonah Williams is playing that bad, did you try Carman yet? Yep. Now, if that would be the other one, is if Jonah Williams starts out, he's bad. You put Carman in there, he's bad. That's prime Lyle Collins is coming in once he's healthy. If neither one of those guys are winning that job.
I hate that even thinking about that conversation just because
if Collins is coming in, it's probably something bad. It's not like, no, the offensive line was great. The team is doing great. And now we're just going to shove Collins in there. It's probably something went wrong.
So we've talked to Duke about it and you have chemistry and guys have had to step up. Say that everybody's healthy and with an offensive line, it's different than another position group. You can't just say, the offensive line is really gelling out there, but you know what, Lyle, it's November. Let's switch something up because of the matchup. That doesn't work with your offensive line like it does other position groups. So we wouldn't see them say, you know what? We like the Lyle Collins matchup better versus that defensive line. So let's just switch him out for this game. That's what's so hard about it. You want to have the depth with your offensive line, and I want Lyle to take his time getting back. But my other question is with Jonah, and I even hate doing this because I feel like I'm being so negative with the offensive line right now, and I actually really believe in the offensive line. And there were a lot of people down on him during regular season. I really do like the offensive line. But say Jonah Williams is your, and we've not, we didn't think Jonah was as bad as a lot of people on social media last year. But say Jonah Williams was exactly like he was last year at right tackle. Are you cool with that? But he's at right tackle now.
The fun thing about it, worst year of his career, I thought he was probably around the same level as Volson, like fine. I don't think he was terrible, which I know sacks allowed. That is thrown out a lot, but I thought overall he was fine. And you can kind of look at what happened throughout the year and explain it a little bit, or maybe just create excuses, however you want to frame that. But if he's playing at the same level again, that's tough because.
And Lyle's he's your shiny new toy on the sideline. He's ready to go.
It depends. That'll depend on how he looks in practice, I think. because that is a scenario that maybe you do replace him. And personally, I think Collins and Jonah may have played at a little bit of a similar level. If not, I may have preferred Jonah last year. Just, I think Collins, there were some issues with the back, and that's why he wasn't practicing. He really just couldn't sustain blocks. But yeah, I think I might prefer Jonah in that case. So I would roll with Jonah. But these guys see him in practice every day. So if they see Collins and he looks better than last year, if he's moving well and they're testing him, he's sustaining these blocks. His back doesn't seem like an issue. His ankles are good. He looks fully healthy. Tough not to go with him, because his last year in Dallas, even though he got injured, replaced by Terrence Steele, etc., man, when he was out there, I still thought he was probably a top 10 right tackle. And you're not going to get that if Jonah Williams is playing the same level he did last year. You probably aren't getting that if Jonah Williams is playing at his peak from 2 years ago. Now, if he plays better than that, yeah, you're going to get top 10 right tackle. But that's where it becomes tough. And I get the idea of going with Collins, and a lot of that will come down to things we don't see. We don't see practice like the coaches do. So if the coaches believe in it, I don't see a reason to go away from it. Personally, I would just roll with the chemistry and the gelling and everything else. I think you're going to get a better offensive line than last year. I think you get a better offensive line since forever ago. But I did say that last year too, because I was excited about Lyle Collins and Jonah Williams' possible ascension, and that didn't happen. So cautiously optimistic this time rather than just optimistic. I'm not trying to be down. I think they'll be good, but we will see. So that is kind of where are you on that? Like, if Jonah's playing, it's disappointing. That would be the first thing I think of. It's like, man,
it's disappointing. It really is.
But is it disappointing enough to replace him?
It depends on the month. Give me the month. I don't think they're going to be afraid, because I think Joe Burrow can be vocal, and maybe it's behind the scenes and they're having those conversations, and what Joe Burrow says is going to matter. And if he feels like, let's give it another try, I do think practice is extremely important. One of the things last year, Lyle Collins barely practiced. They managed his practices because of his injury. And it's unfortunate because we didn't get to see Dallas Cowboys Lyle Collins, unfortunately. So I think the perfect scenario is Lyle Collins gets on the pup to start the season, and he is ready to roll midway point of the season if you need to go to him as an option. I want Jonah to work out. I want Cordell Bolson to work out. I want Orlando. I want every single person on this offensive line. We already know, I feel like, what we got, what they have in Alex Kappa and Ted Karras. But, there's some unknowns going into the season. And, I feel like I was kind of a little bit negative for Cordell Wilson, and I hope, it doesn't come across that way, because I want him to play well. Like I've said before, you're getting a rookie deal. I need to stop calling him a rookie because he'll be in year 2. It's expensive in the guard market, and they have other guys they need to pay. So I want him to work out, and we'll see what happens. And I do think it's extremely important that Orlando Brown's on his other side. So
yeah, I think the ideal role for Lyle Collins is taking what Hakeem Adeniji did before the injuries and playing that six offensive lineman, which they like to use.
They love that.
Oh man, I mean, him just blasting guys.
Yeah.
And just when he gets out there, it's just, hey, go kill that guy. Like, that's what he does. That'd be great. Just work down blocks, work double teams, combos, all this other stuff. You don't need to work backwards, pass set, and hold up against whoever out there, Nick Bosa's of the world. You can just maul, and that's what he loves to do. He loves to maul guys. So that's what I think. The 6 offensive linemen, this would also mean that the offensive line's playing pretty well. So that's also why I like this scenario, is the offensive line's playing pretty well through the first 6 weeks, and then you're just kind of, hey, we've got a weapon now as our 6th offensive lineman, rather than we want to do this because we like doing this. It's we want to do this because we're going to dominate when we do this. And I think that's what you could look at with Lyle Collins coming back. Highest scenario in my mind, like highest potential, is him as the 6th guy and just taking dudes out of the club.
I agree with that. Then I got a little bummed because I remember that they have to face Nick Bosa. So that kind of bums me out a little bit.
They sure do. A lot of chips coming. Double teams, chips, everything. Ball out.
Maybe he'll be a little nice because his friend Joe Burrow's on the other side and just say, you know what? Take it easy on you guys. But yeah, Nick Bosa terrifies me. He's one of the guys, and I'd put JJ Watt and Myles Garrett into that category too.
JJ.
I mean, not JJ, TJ. TJ.
Prime JJ is underrated. I think Prime JJ was about
JJ
as,
Watt. Sorry, JJ Watt. TJ
Prime-
Watt. I do think he's terrifying. So
I'm ready to drop a bomb. No, nobody's listening. I think Prime JJ Watt was about as good as Prime Aaron Donald.
I'm gonna put it on Twitter.
Okay.
We'll see what the people think.
I think Aaron Donald sustained it. He didn't get hurt, but like peak JJ Watt. Are we forgetting?
Oh, you know what makes me a little nervous? Go back to the 2011 TJ.
2012.
2012. 2011.
Yeah, 2013.
He came after Andy Dalton, didn't he? Just like come like as a monster and just pretty much in that playoff game, and it was over.
Caught interceptions for touchdowns. Yeah, it was. People say TJ Yates won that game. It was a different J. It was JJ Watt as a rookie, and then also as a second-year player, kind of won those games.
Yeah, that's really depressing to think about in those playoff games. They had no business being there, but it was whatever. They should have won actually one of them, but hey, we won't go back. We're not going all the way back almost over a decade ago. But we'll see. Offensive line talk will continue. No doubt about that during the summer break. And then we'll get into more player profiles, and then we'll have our mailbag. Make sure you're following along over on Twitter. We have a YouTube version of the podcast. So that's going to be really fun for some people that have asked about video, and we will have this out. And you're going to want to check that out. We'll have all the information when we tweet it out over on Twitter. You can follow Mike, Bengals_Sands, me at LNDS Patterson. And thank you for listening to It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati.